Hello, and welcome to Agile University. Today we're going to be in the Defining Effective User Stories course. User stories are such an important part of the Agile methodology and play a critical role in successful sprint cycles. This course series contains two modules that focus on breaking down what makes user stories effective and should help sprint teams develop successful user stories. Our first module of the course will describe the fundamentals behind user stories and look at the basics of the sprint cycle. Follow me. The sprint cycle involves several moving parts. Prior to a project kickoff, executives, stakeholders, customers, and users provide input that help to write and finalize the themes, epics, and user stories for a desired end functionality. As you can see from the diagram, themes break down into epics, which further break down into user stories. In the 5 days leading up to the sprint team conduct a task breakout to determine what they want to accomplish in the sprint by even further decomposing user stories into tangible, workable tasks. Once the tasks going into a sprint are determined, the 4-week sprint begins, and at the end of the sprint, if all goes well, is a finished product. So that's the high-level overview of the overall sprint cycle. But our focus in this module is on the process leading up to the sprint. Let's begin by discussing themes. Themes are created by the business, who work together to define objectives at a high level. You can think of the theme as a larger project that requires many smaller subtasks in order to be completed. Themes are similar to projects in the waterfall methodology. An example of a theme relating to HHSC would be, as a client, I want to renew my healthcare benefits automatically if there are no changes to my case from the previous year, so that I do not have to renew my benefits online, in person, or by mail. As you can see, the example outlines a broad end goal that will require several smaller objectives to be achieved before the desired outcome can be fulfilled. Therefore, to establish these additional smaller objectives, the theme must be decomposed into multiple epics. Epics describe more discrete objectives that must be accomplished in order to fulfill the broader overarching end goal as defined by the theme. One epic that can be decomposed from our previous theme could be, as a caseworker, I want TIERS to automatically check within its electronic data sources, ELDS, to determine if there are any changes to a client's case, so that I can determine whether additional information is needed from the client. While the verbiage here has become more granular than that of the theme, it still remains quite high level. What are the different changes that can occur to a client's case? Are their electronic data sources comprehensive of all checks needed on a client before renewing benefits? This information has yet to be determined. Thus, the epic requires additional, even smaller objectives in order to be fulfilled. These more granular objectives are called user stories. Now, we are ready to look at the role of the user story in the Agile process. Based on our previous discussion of themes and epics, can you guess how user stories are decomposed from epics? Yes, user stories are even more granular and capture the specific description of a software feature or functionality that addresses the overarching objectives outlined by epics and themes. This part of the Agile process is where the sprint team can turn words into action and create the desired working software. User stories are created within Jira through the Create Issue function, as shown here, which formally documents the purpose and details for each user story. Refer to the Jira Training video course titled Developing User Stories in Jira for more details on the specific Jira functionalities to use when writing and documenting the user stories. While the template includes multiple sections, there are 3 sections that are most important to complete when writing each user story during the user story development process: the summary, the description, and the acceptance criteria. We will now go into further detail about each of them. First is the summary, which is a short phrase that condenses the main point of the user story. A sample summary for our previous example could be pre-populated renewal application. Once the story is saved, the summary will become the name of the user story and be shown in the backlog page, allowing for quick identification and access to the specific user story. Second is the description, which is a fleshed out version of the summary that elaborates on the user story's main point in a short, simple sentence. It allows for all stakeholders involved in the sprint to understand what the end objectives are and is formatted with 3 parts: role, goal, and benefit. Let's continue with our previous example discussing the client who wants to renew healthcare benefits. Take a few seconds to think about and jot down what a potential user story may be in the role, goal, benefit format based on the epic and summary information that we've previously discussed. You can pause this video if you need more time. Great job! This is what I came up with. The role is from the perspective of the user and answers the question, who is using the system? In this example, a client will be receiving communications and taking action to renew their benefits. Therefore, the role takes on the persona of the Texas resident. You may remember what a persona is from the Agile Fundamentals course. However, let's quickly recap. Personas are utilized in user stories to represent fictitious people who could be real-life end users of the functionality being developed. They are intended to allow teams to focus on the specific objectives of a specific person who may interact with the system or some related part, like correspondence. It is a good practice to record relevant personas in the user's personas and systems portion of the Create Issue box. To further clarify the terminology, the term role describes the overall group of potential end users, and the term persona describes specific subsets of those end users who may hold vastly different roles or may interact with the system in vastly different ways. Personas that are relevant to HHSC include, but are not limited to, caseworkers, system users, and HHSC clients. Next, we have the goal, which answers the question, what does the user want to do within the system? The client, when it is time to renew their application, wants to receive an application that already contains the information they filled in last year. Finally, the benefit answers the question, why does the user want to implement their particular goal? The benefit portion can also convey the types of value that may be derived from successfully implementing the user story. In our example, the client's desired benefit could be to reduce the duplicative effort of filling in information already present in the system. This way, they will only need to update the fields that have changed since the last application. Putting it all together, the user story we chose says, as a client, I want to receive a pre-populated renewal application with my previous year's information so that I can respond only if there are changes to my current case. If you recall from the beginning of this course, the overall theme stated, as a client, I want to renew my health care benefits automatically if there are no changes to my case from the previous year so that I do not have to renew my benefits online, in person, or by mail. And one epic we decomposed from the theme stated, as a caseworker, I want Tiers to automatically check within its electronic data sources to determine if there are any changes to a client's case so that it can be determined whether additional information is needed from the client. Our current user story, therefore, is broken down from the epic and addresses just one of the many components of the epic. Of course, it is important to note that simple verbiage alone is not sufficient to convey everything needed for a system capability or feature. Acceptance criteria, which we'll discuss later, and other materials that can be attached to the user story in JIRA will augment the description with tactical and actionable information that facilitate the common understanding between the team and the product owner and lead to a successful final product. We have covered so much in this module, but it seems like we're out of time. We still have to talk about a very important component of the user story, the acceptance criteria. Please join me in our next module, Importance of Acceptance Criteria. But in the meantime, here are some questions for you to consider.